Dick Krickus, Mary Washington University. I think the speakers have both made the case for why it is almost certain that the START treaty will be signed. Russia is afraid of the U.S. first strike capability. It is in the United States' interest to reduce the rockets that are directed at us at the same time that our conventional advantage is overwhelming. The only problem, however, may be that there are people who continue to use national security as a partisan political wedge issue, and that's what Krockheimer is doing and his friends. And that brings to the whole question that the only place where we might have difficulty, there's two areas. One is if there's some kind of blow-up in the region, Georgia, Russia again, although that is extremely unlikely. It's not in Russia's interest to do that. And the second one is the whole question of how the Senate is going to handle this. And that's what I'd like to ask the panelists. What do they think about these potential obstacles? Thank you.
Well, like you, I don't see that a Russo-Georgian war is imminent, although there's a lot of tension there, and the Russians have put a lot of troops into the area to intimidate Georgia, and are claiming that Georgia somehow is seeking to attack them, which is, quite frankly, ridiculous. If you look at this, Russia has nothing to gain from another war with Georgia. It has a lot to lose. It could beat Georgia. That's not the issue. But strategically, in terms of its overall security position in Eurasia, and in its relationship with the United States and with other members of the CIS, in Central Asia and the Caucasus, and Ukraine and Moldova, it would lose an enormous amount of political standing and gain very little. As it is, Russia has an enormous security problem in the North Caucasus, which would only be added to by another war in Georgia. The North Caucasus today is on fire. Russia cannot put it out. There are hijackings, brigandage, criminality, terrorism going on every day. Local government officials are being assassinated right and left, and there seems to be no way for the Russians to stop this. A war with Georgia will only add Georgia to the list of Russian enemies. I don't think they see the need for that. As for the Senate, you can't speculate in advance of a treaty as to what the Senate will do, but if the treaty really gives adequate guarantees of U.S. capability to defend U.S. interests, by which I mean not only the territorial U.S., but our alliances with NATO and with Japan, then I don't see a significant problem arising in the Senate. There will be criticism on the missile defense issue if missile defenses are withdrawn, because for the Republican Party, missile defense, whatever its merits, is actually a theological principle as much as a strategic principle. But there will also be questions about launchers, because if we do cut the number of launchers, and I think we have 1,200 right now, or about that, down to 1,100, some people will argue that this is strategically misguided, that it will force a complete renovation of the structure of our nuclear forces from a triad, that is land, air, and sea-based launchers of nuclear weapons, to a dyad, to 2 instead of 3. So all things being equal, I do not anticipate serious problems with the treaty at this moment.
On Georgia, I agree. I think Russia made its point with Georgia. And I think Russia also, in making its point, was a little disappointed in how its troops fared. I mean, I actually thought, Russia did better in Georgia on a number of counts than we've seen Russian forces do in quite a long time. It has professionalized its army. But the Russians were not pleased with the extent, the mistakes that were evident, with the problems that the world could see. I think that if Russia does decide to teach Georgia or anybody else a lesson, it's going to be after the military reform has moved forward a little bit more. That's just my prediction on likely conflicts. But that doesn't mean that something can't happen that will derail the relationship between the U.S. and Russia and that could imperil the treaty. There are a lot of things on which there's disagreement, and there's a lot to be gained in Russia from at least appearing to stand up to the United States. And while in a lot of the world, the replacement of George W. Bush by Barack Obama has eliminated this view of the United States as a hostile bully. In Russia, and I mean in Russia domestically, that view is very much still there. So it's a very effective way for Russian leadership to demonstrate power and strength, criticizing the United States, standing up to the United States, demonstrating there are things Russia can do that the United States can't stop them. On the other hand, sitting down with the President of the United States and negotiating arms control is also good domestically because it does demonstrate that Russia is an important state, that it is on an equal basis, at least in some areas, with the United States. So it's a trade-off. But I think the risk is there between now and December, certainly, and if we end up taking longer to negotiate this treaty, even more risk that something could derail it. That said, there's a lot of interest in getting the treaty done. So it's possible it could survive. It's, this is a very equivocal answer. My bet is on the treaty, but I think that it's not going to be easy getting there either through the negotiations themselves or just keeping the relationship on track enough to keep the discussions going. For the Senate, that's a second hard slog. I think every aspect of this treaty will be examined carefully. Missile defense will be a tremendous issue if it's included in any way. Launchers, certainly. Also the question of, are we reducing conventional capability and reducing our launchers? Because that is something, the big debate used to be, do we count warheads or do we count launchers? That the Russians' concern is that we have a lot of stored warheads just because the way that we take care of our arsenal is different from the way that they do. They destroy the stuff, we store it, so we have stored warheads. They are concerned that if we keep conventional launchers with strategic capability, we could put stored warheads back on them. Though more recently, the Russian line has also been that U.S. conventional supremacy is such that they're actually worried about a conventional strategic reach in and of itself. They're worried about the conventional launchers in and of itself. So the way to square that circle is to count the launchers, right? The launchers are what they're worried about, regardless of what's on them. But you do that, and you are limiting U.S. strategic capability more broadly. It's not just a nuclear issue. And I think there will be people in the Senate who are concerned about that. That said, I do not think it is impossible for the administration to make a very effective case on the importance of this treaty, on the importance, for all of the reasons we've talked about before, and for the Senate to understand and accept that as a body, and therefore ratify the treaty.